You've probably seen the video. Pour hydrogen peroxide in your toilet tank, and suddenly your bathroom transforms. It looks convincing, it sounds harmless. But here's what that video never mentions. The tank, the overflow tube, the rim jets, the hinges, the brush you shove back in its holder without a second thought. All of it sits there, ignored, while you focus on the bowl. So today we're doing this right. We'll show you what 3% peroxide can actually do, and more importantly, we're going to expose the real reason your toilet parts are quietly wearing out. Just stick around. Before we even get to hydrogen peroxide, we need to talk about where your toilet is actually dirty, because it's probably not where you think. Most people clean the seat, swipe the rim, maybe scrub the bowl with a brush once a week, and call the job done. Meanwhile, an entire set of parts sits just out of sight, quietly collecting grime that never gets touched. None of it is dramatic. None of it smells like a crisis. It's just slow, steady buildup happening in places you've probably never once looked. Let's start where this whole thing actually lives, inside the tank. Lift that lid and look. You'll probably feel a small flash of disgust, because most tanks haven't been touched since the day the toilet was installed. There's usually a layer of mineral crust clinging to the walls, a faint cloudy film sitting on top of the water, and sometimes a thin streak of something greenish near the water line that nobody really wants to name out loud. The tank is also where condensation collects on humid days, which means it's not just dusty in there, it's occasionally damp enough to encourage mold along the edges. This is the part of your toilet doing the most work and getting the least attention. Right in the middle of that tank sits the overflow tube, basically the forgotten middle child of your bathroom. Its only job is to keep water from spilling over the top if the fill valve misbehaves, and because it's tucked dead center, almost nobody ever wipes it down. Grime builds along the inside rim where water constantly trickles past, and over months that thin film hardens into something closer to a crust. Give it a closer look sometime, maybe with a flashlight. You'll likely find a ring of buildup running right along the edge, quietly doing its job while collecting gunk nobody ever planned for and definitely never scheduled into a cleaning routine. Now follow the water down into the bowl toward the rim jets. These are the small holes tucked under the rim that spray water into the bowl every time you flush. They're also one of the easiest spots for hard water and bacteria to settle in, mostly because you can't see them without bending over and squinting up at an angle most people never bother with. Over time, those jets clog slightly, water pressure weakens, and flushes get a little less convincing without anyone noticing exactly why. Most people blame the toilet itself or assume it's just getting old. The actual issue is usually sitting just out of sight, doing nothing while you replace parts that were never the problem. Then there's everything you actually touch with bare hands. The handle gets pressed by every single person in the house, sometimes right after they've handled raw chicken, taken out the trash, or wiped a sick kid's forehead, and it almost never gets wiped down on its own. It's one of the highest traffic surfaces in the entire bathroom and routinely the most ignored, mostly because it doesn't look dirty, it just looks like a handle. That's exactly the trick germs are counting on. The seat hinges are even worse, in a quieter way. That little hinge mechanism collects hair, dust, splash residue, and whatever drips down during a quick wipe, all in a spot most cleaning routines skip entirely. Who's really unscrewing a toilet seat to scrub underneath the hinge plate every week? Nobody. That's exactly the point. It sits there, slowly accumulating a layer of grime that you'd probably never notice unless you actually removed the seat and looked underneath, which almost nobody ever does. And don't even get started on the brush holder. That little canister sits there quietly housing a brush that just spent its entire life scrubbing the inside of a toilet, then gets shoved back in wet, dripping, and sealed away in the dark where airflow basically doesn't exist. It's basically a tiny incubator built into your bathroom decor. If you've never actually pulled that holder out and looked at what's collected at the bottom, consider this your gentle warning that you might genuinely not want to, at least not right before a meal. Now zoom back out to the bowl itself, the one part of this whole system everyone actually cleans on a regular basis. Even there, things aren't as spotless as they look. That faint ring just under the waterline, the one that seems to come back no matter how often you scrub it away, is usually a mix of hard water minerals and old organic buildup that has settled into the porcelain's microscopic texture over months or years. Your toilet can look completely clean on the surface, smell fine, and pass every casual glance, while every single one of these other zones quietly tells a very different story underneath. Add it all up, and you get a toilet that passes the eyeball test every single day, looking perfectly normal from the outside, while several of its smaller parts slowly degrade in the background, completely unnoticed and completely unaddressed, for months or even years at a stretch, without fail. So here's where the viral trick comes in. You've probably seen someone online pour hydrogen peroxide straight into the tank and call it a miracle fix for all of this. The idea isn't crazy. 3% hydrogen peroxide really can help with a handful of these problem zones in specific ways, for specific reasons we'll get into. But before we go any further into what it actually does and doesn't do, there's something else worth knowing first. Something almost none of these viral videos ever bother to mention about the convenient little alternative most people reach for instead. The one sitting in plenty of tanks right now. That convenient little alternative is the drop-in bleach tablet, the kind you toss into the tank once and forget about for months at a time. We'll get to exactly why that's a problem in a second. But first, let's actually talk straight about what 3% hydrogen peroxide does once it's sitting in your tank, because most videos either oversell it wildly or barely explain it at all. It's not magic, and it won't dissolve hard water deposits on contact or scrub anything by itself. What it does well is loosen light organic grime, the kind made up of mold spores, mildew, and thin bacterial film clinging to the tank walls and the underside of the lid. It also genuinely helps freshen the space and cut down on musty odor, since it breaks apart a lot of the organic matter actually causing that smell, all without the sharp chemical sting that bleach leaves behind. Now here's the part almost none of these viral videos mention. Fluid Master, one of the largest manufacturers of toilet fill valves and flush mechanisms, has actually warned that letting bleach or chlorine-based tablets sit in the tank long-term can damage the rubber and plastic components inside, things like the flapper, the fill valve seals, and several smaller parts that keep your flush working the way it should. That's the real factory secret nobody talks about. The tablet everyone trusts as the easy, set it and forget it solution is often the same thing quietly breaking down the guts of your toilet, one flush at a time, for every single day it sits in there dissolving. Think about that for a second. The thing being sold as the lazy, no-effort upgrade is the same thing slowly working against the moving parts that make your toilet flush properly in the first place. It's not dramatic, it's not instant, it's just a quiet trade-off nobody mentions on the packaging, playing out one tablet, one flush, one season at a time. So with that out of the way, let's get into what most videos covering this trend get wrong, because the comment sections on these things are full of fair specific worries, and almost none of them get a real answer. First, peroxide is not a miracle mineral remover if you've got a thick, years-old hard water ring sitting just under the waterline. Plain peroxide on its own usually isn't strong enough to pull that out completely. It can help soften it a little and make scrubbing easier, but it needs backup, usually in the form of a mild abrasive, to actually finish the job. Anyone telling you it dissolves stubborn rings on contact by itself is overselling what a fairly gentle, mild oxidizer can realistically do in a short contact window. Second, it's not a serious clog fix, and you shouldn't treat it like one. If your toilet is genuinely backed up, pouring peroxide down there is mostly going to give you a bit of harmless fizzing and a false sense that something productive just happened. It's fine for minor slow drainage caused by light buildup, but it is not a substitute for a plunger, and it's definitely not a substitute for a plumber if the blockage is real. Third, Never mix hydrogen peroxide with vinegar or with bleach, full stop. Mixing it with vinegar creates a corrosive compound called peracetic acid that's rough on rubber and metal fittings over repeated exposure. Mixing it with bleach can release chlorine-based fumes you really don't want to be breathing in a small enclosed bathroom. On dilution, plain 3% peroxide straight from the brown bottle is already the correct, ready-to-use strength for everything we're covering here. You don't need to water it down, and you definitely don't need a stronger industrial concentration, which is actually more likely to irritate skin and surfaces than help. As for the rubber seals themselves, the worry isn't really about peroxide at all. It's about constant chlorine exposure, which is exactly what bleach tablets create day after day. Used the way we're about to show you, in small, occasional amounts with reasonable contact time, 3% peroxide is considerably gentler on rubber gaskets and seals than a dissolving chlorine tablet sitting in the water around the clock. Then there's the question that comes up constantly in the comments. What about septic systems? It's a fair concern, and it deserves a straight answer instead of a dismissive one. The EPA has been clear that septic systems depend on a healthy population of bacteria to actually break waste down, and pouring household chemicals down the drain in large, frequent amounts can disrupt that balance over time. That doesn't mean a small, occasional amount of diluted peroxide is going to wreck your septic tank overnight, but it does mean the amount and the frequency genuinely matter here, more than most viral videos bother to explain. We'll get into exactly where that line sits, along with the dark bottle question and whether any of this actually works, in a moment. And that brings up the other big question hovering over every one of these videos. Does any of this actually work, or is it just oddly satisfying content that fizzes nicely on camera? Fair question. The honest answer sits somewhere in the middle, closer to modest, real improvement than miracle transformation, which admittedly doesn't make for quite as exciting a thumbnail. None of that means the trick is pointless, far from it. It just means doing it well requires a little more nuance than pour some in and walk away, which is basically the entire instruction set in most of the videos currently circulating. The difference between a mediocre result and a genuinely noticeable one usually comes down to a handful of small details most people skip entirely without realizing it. So where does that leave septic systems, since that's probably the single most common worry in the comments? The short version: if you're on a septic system, keep this trick small and occasional rather than turning it into a weekly ritual. A cup or so, once in a while, isn't going to overwhelm the colony of bacteria doing the actual work down there, but dumping it in by the bottle every single time you clean is a different story, and it's exactly the kind of habit that quietly adds up over months without anyone noticing a problem until there is one. Moderation is the actual rule here, not blanket avoidance, and definitely not the all-or-nothing panic some comment sections seem to assume. And about that dark bottle question people keep asking in the comments. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down when it's exposed to light, slowly turning back into plain water and losing its effectiveness along the way. That's why it always ships in an opaque brown bottle in the first place, and it's also why you should keep it stored that way, away from direct sunlight, instead of transferring it into a clear spray bottle and leaving it on a sunny windowsill. Do that, and you're basically just spraying tap water within a few weeks. Now that we've cleared up what most videos skip, let's actually get into how to do this properly. And since we mentioned hard water rings earlier, here's the actual backup peroxide needs to handle them properly. Sprinkle a little baking soda directly onto that stubborn ring, then pour peroxide over it. It'll foam up almost immediately, which helps lift mineral buildup that's been sitting there for years. If the ring is still stubborn after that, a wet pumice stone, used gently in small circles, finishes the job without scratching the porcelain underneath. That combination, not peroxide alone, is what actually clears out the worst rings. Now for the everyday routine. You don't need to fill the tank to the brim. A modest amount, somewhere around a cup, poured directly into the tank is plenty. The part most people rush past is contact time. Pour it in, then walk away and let it actually sit for a while, ideally somewhere around 20 to 30 minutes, so it has a real chance to work on the grime instead of getting flushed away the moment it touches the water. For the rim jets, specifically, pour a small amount directly down the overflow tube rather than just dumping it into the standing water. That tube feeds straight into the jets, so this is the most direct route to actually reaching the buildup tucked under the rim where regular bowl cleaning never quite reaches. The handle, the seat, and the hinges deserve their own pass, completely separate from the tank and bowl. Pour a little peroxide onto a cloth or into a small spray bottle and wipe those high-touch surfaces down on their own. Let it sit for a minute or two before wiping dry. Don't lump this step in with everything else. These are the spots your hands actually touch, so they deserve dedicated attention, not an afterthought. Then there's the brush, the tool doing the dirtiest job in the whole bathroom and getting the least credit for it. Fill a small container with peroxide, drop the brush in, and let it soak for about 30 minutes. It'll come out noticeably fresher, and so will the holder it usually sits in. Run through that list once, and you've actually covered every zone we walked through earlier. The tank itself, the overflow tube and rim jets it feeds, the handle and hinges everyone touches, and the brush nobody really wants to think about. None of those individual steps take more than a few minutes each, and unlike the version most videos show, none of them rely on a chemical that's quietly working against your toilet's rubber and plastic parts every single day it's sitting in there, tablet after tablet. The best part of doing it this way is how low effort and low cost the whole thing is. You're not buying 5 different specialty cleaners or scrubbing until your arm gives out. A single bottle of 3% peroxide, maybe a box of baking soda already sitting in your fridge, and a few extra minutes spread across a handful of small steps gets you a noticeably fresher toilet without the constant chlorine exposure sitting in your tank around the clock. Pour it in the tank, soak it into the brush, wipe it onto the handle. That's the whole routine, and none of it requires scrubbing like you're auditioning for a cleaning commercial. The real takeaway here isn't really about hydrogen peroxide at all. It's about understanding why the convenient little tablet sitting in so many tanks right now looks like the easy choice while quietly working against the very parts keeping your toilet running. Bleach tablets hide the damage because the toilet still looks clean while the rubber parts age quietly underneath, one flush at a time, completely out of sight. So, have you ever actually looked inside your own tank before today? Be honest. Most people haven't, and that's not a knock on you. It's just how these things work. The parts of a house that stay out of sight tend to stay out of mind too, right up until something stops working the way it should. Now you know exactly where to look, and exactly what's probably waiting for you in there. Are you team peroxide, team bleach tablet, or somewhere in between, maybe switching back and forth depending on how busy life gets? There's no wrong answer here. The point was never to make anyone feel guilty about a drop-in tablet they bought years ago and forgot about. It's just about knowing the trade-off you're actually making, instead of assuming the convenient option is automatically the safe one. And if you've got a toilet trick that's worked better than anything covered here, something passed down, from a parent, a landlord, or just years of trial and error, drop it in the comments. Plenty of people scrolling through this are dealing with exactly the same questions, the same mystery rings, the same musty smell they can't quite place, and a comment from someone who's actually solved it is worth more than another generic tip. If this saved you from a mistake you didn't know you were making, go ahead and like it, share it with whoever handles the cleaning in your house, and subscribe for more of this kind of practical, no-nonsense breakdown. Turn on notifications too so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video.